Hi everybody, Mature Simmer here. Welcome to another episode of the Non-Aviator Flight Sim series. In this episode, I am going to talk specifically about Standard Instrument Departure Charts, or SIDs. In these videos about charts, I'm using a specific route. I'm using this route from Orlando to Kansas City. So obviously our departure airport is Orlando, so the SIDs that we're going to be looking at are related to that. In the flight plan I generated in SimBrief, it is suggesting that I use the Red Sox SID. So when I go here to Orlando, I'm looking first off for departures. There they are, departure procedures, and now I keep scrolling down, and now I've got Red Sox 1, which is what we have in our flight plan, and you can see that there are two pages, so you'd open both of these. Typically the first page is going to be the diagram that's going to give you vectors and headings and so forth. Again, you don't need to understand this in detail. You're not flying a real plane, you're doing flight sim and so forth. But depending on how much you want to get into, obviously there's a lot to cover here. But I'm just going to cover the basics that you need. You're always going to have a set of runways, or the runways for the airport usually will appear somewhere on the SID chart. So in this case, we know Kansas City has these SIDs. And if you want to understand how we know these are the runways, you can go look at the airport diagram video that I'll link here that shows you how we understand what the runway configuration is from that. But in our case, we're going to be going off of 18 left, which is here, and that means we're going to be heading out this way. So SIDs are typically chosen by where you're headed. So Kansas City is basically northwest of Orlando. So of all the available SIDs available from Orlando, this is what is typically used for Kansas City. SimBrief will usually provide the more frequent things, or the preferred routes as they're called in air traffic in some cases. And in this case, we're leaving on 18 left because of wind, because that is what determines, again, you want to take off into and land into the wind, because that creates the appropriate best case scenario for the easiest way for your aircraft to fly. Again, if you want more detail on how an aircraft flies or the dynamics of flight, go check out this video here. So you can kind of see, there's arrows here. It's kind of showing you the direction depending on what you're doing. Obviously, it's called Red Sox. It's usually because it's kind of the main waypoint before you get to what are called transitions. There's Red Sox right there, hence the name of this SID. But you might be wondering, well, I don't understand, like this is sending me this way. How does this all work? That's where the second page comes into play. So to make this a little more understandable, I'm going to go ahead and put these next to each other so that you can see what we're looking at. You're typically going to get a text description of what is occurring as well. You can see here on the SID we've got a top altitude of 7,000. And that's basically before you get to that point, you're not going to exceed 7,000 as the altitude. So we're going to end up seeing that come into play within the description that we've got here. So in this case, again, we're leaving on 18 left, so let's deal with that first. And so we can see here, takeoff runway, 18 left. So we're going to climb on heading 185 to intercept course 214. So if we look down here, 185 to intercept 214. So that is what that's explaining. And we're doing that to cross Vilnius at or above 1500. So Vilnius is a waypoint. 1500, the line underneath it is telling you at or above. Then on track 237, 4 vectors to Red Sox. Okay, so you're leaving Vilnius at 237, and then 4 vectors to Red Sox. What that's telling you is air traffic control is then going to tell you how to get here. They may route you around a roundabout way. They may just tell you, hey, go direct if there's not a lot of traffic in the way. They have the freedom to do what they want. But instead of creating a specific path, they've decided when they created this SID to say, you know, maybe there's less traffic departing to the south in south operations out of Orlando that head that way, so we're not going to worry about it and not be as detailed. Or maybe they just didn't have great waypoints to use. Maybe they went over areas that require some decisions. Like, once again, if there's a lot of homes in between here, you know, maybe during the day they'll fly direct and they'll go over because there's less concern about noise because people are awake. But in the evening and at night, when people might want it to be quieter, maybe they take a more roundabout way to get you there. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. You don't care. All right, but now let's look at just the opposite end to understand. So let's say that the airport was operating in north operations, and instead of 18 left, we were on 36 right, which would be the alternative of that. So we're now at this end of the runway, taking off this way. So we're down here, and now you can see there's a lot more text here. You can see that right away. But climb on heading 05 to 600. So we're going to leave 05 to 600. So again, line below 600, pointing right there. Then direct to cross facts at or above 2300. So that'll be a waypoint. There's our next waypoint. Okay, and then linked here we can see is facts. Sometimes you'll see this on charts just to not clutter things up and make it confusing. Again, line under 2300, giving us the same information that we have. And you'll notice it's not giving you a heading there because some of this depends on how far you fly out before you start heading toward facts. Slower plane, you'll be able to make that turn sooner, and therefore your heading will be a little shallower than this is. You know, there's nothing that they're telling you that you need to turn at a certain point. The guidance here is basically proceed on a 5-degree heading until you reach an altitude of 600 or higher. So again, certain aircraft are going to get there faster than others, and so therefore your heading is going to be at a different rate. Then on track 359 to cross ears at or above 3000. So then we're going on 359 to ears, again, line below 3000. The new piece of information we have here is this parentheses. This is now telling us that the distance between these two waypoints is 2 miles. So you basically now know I'm going to have 2 miles to climb 700 feet. If you're on autopilot, if you're using a flight management computer, whatever it is, the plane's going to help you hit those, or it's going to tell you that you can't, in which case you'd want to let air traffic know, if you're using air traffic, that you can't achieve what it's telling you, and then they work with you to figure that out. But usually you're going to be in pretty good shape. Over 2 miles, I think most aircraft should be able to climb 700 feet. All right. Then on track 342 to cross lefty at or above 4,000 and at or below 23,000. Not quite sure what this is about, but it is what it is. 342 going to lefty, line under, above 4,000 or above, line over 230,000. That's the ceiling. So you've got to be between those two distances there, and those two altitudes there, and you've got 3 miles. Then on track 275 to cross Blossom at or below 7,000. So this is where our top altitude starts to come into place. 8 miles here. So you'll notice these really aren't to scale. Kind of the 3 and the 8, I'd say those lines are roughly the same. They're kind of giving you this view just so you can read the chart a little bit easier. They obviously need enough space to be able to put that information out. And then you're going on track 252 to Red Sox. 25 miles to get to Red Sox, and that whole time you're sitting at 7,000 feet. They haven't given you anything that you can go any higher. And then what you'll have, in this case we have just one, you'll have things called transitions. So we've got the Jeffries transition. So if I look here, Red Sox, Jeffries. So that is telling me that I'm going that way. And again, you may get air traffic directions from there to, the direction will be the direction, but as far as what altitude and so forth, That'll get moved along, but you can see there's a 29-mile separation there. Sometimes you'll have text after the transitions that give you some more information. And again, you'll use it as you need to. But what you can see is, in some cases, you're going to get very detailed instructions of what to do. So kind of when they tell you climb via SID, for example, that would be more likely a direction you're going to get from air traffic if you're heading north on the Red Sox departure than if you're heading south. Because basically here, your only climb point is be above 1,500 feet at Vilnius, and then after that, you've got nothing. So they're likely, as they're giving you radar vectors, they're going to give you altitudes. And again, air traffic's going to enforce this too, so they're probably not going to raise you above 7,000 feet, which is again why I'm a little confused on this 23,000 or lower at Lefty. But my guess is that is used for something else, and so they need to allow that as well. And it might be a departure point for certain type of aircraft where they're in essence leaving at this point and they're not even heading to Red Sox. If I was to make a completely wild guess, this would be something likely to do with special type of aircraft, like military aircraft. And if they're operating out of Orlando, say the Florida National Guard or something, that's where they'd go and they'd head out. And obviously they'd want to be climbing very quickly and getting up into the height. And so they're kind of cleared after they get to Ears to just go. And so they'd climb those 20,000 feet in those 3 miles and then likely transition out and keep going from there. So you could have multiple transitions. All of those will then again be picked by your flight plan. I highly encourage using SimBrief. Then you're not sitting there trying to just make up things and not following what would be real world preferred routes. So hopefully that gives you enough to understand what you need with SIDS and understand how to interpret them and so forth. Keep in mind with any of these things, if you're using a flight management computer and you've got your flight plan programmed in, like the plane takes care of a lot of this for you. But it's always nice, if you want to know, to be able to understand where this stuff comes from and how to understand it. If you've enjoyed this and haven't dropped a like, please consider that. If you are not a subscriber to the channel yet, please consider that, and I will see you next time.